Florida is beginning the cleanup from Hurricane Milton, which left a trail of destruction across the state. The storm has knocked out power for more than 3 million people, and flooding alerts are in force in many areas. At least 10 people have been confirmed dead, but the state's governor says Florida avoided the worst.
A coast-to-coast path of destruction. Hurricane Milton damaged homes and docks in Venice on Florida's west coast. Just 2 weeks after another major hurricane, Helene, devastated the state.
Now with Milton here, we've lost the brand new carports. Our dock is destroyed. There's some roof damage from things flying around.
In Clearwater, emergency crews rescued stranded residents trapped in their homes by more than a meter of floodwater. In Tampa, many roads were impassable. Some residents had their property completely flooded.
I don't know what to say. It's a lot. Born and raised here, never seen nothing like this.
Authorities have promised a quick recovery.
We're going to bounce right back. So we have all hands on deck. Our people are already out working, getting the debris up. So we'll be back up and running before you know it.
In St. Petersburg, drinking water had to be shut off across the city. Residents were told to boil water instead. Here, winds collapsed a crane. Despite damage across Florida, the state's governor said the outcome still looks better than the initial forecast.
What we can say is the storm was significant, but thankfully this was not the worst case scenario.
But Floridians could still be facing danger from tropical storms in the near future. The Atlantic hurricane season lasts until the end of November.
DW reporter Stefan Simons is on the ground in Florida, in Clearwater, to be precise, close to where the hurricane made landfall last night. Stefan, you just arrived in Clearwater. You're closer to the coastline now. What are you seeing?
Oh, it's still like 14 kilometers away from the coastline, and there's no way getting to it because it's, of course, blocked off. Because this is where still the clearance and rescue operations happen here and there now. But I want to step out of the picture and show you what is typical, though, for Pinellas County and Clearwater and everything from here down south along the coast. You see those power poles there snapped, and if my cameraman goes all the way down there, you see it goes down, 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 and down until they completely break down. And this is the explanation for 3.3 million people without power. Utility companies and utility workers are assessing where they can work on quick fixes, but of course this is not a quick fix. All the way down there, all the power poles down and the power lines down. This is dangerous, but not a quick fix. This will take a while, and people just have to deal with it. Now, how do they deal with it? Wait it out. No power, no internet, no TV. Okay. Also no refrigerator or AC. It's getting warmer now. The storm is gone. It's going to be heating up again in the next 1 or 2 days. And of course, there's a lot of humidity in the air too. That's not very pleasant. Or you go to a center, a service center, a shelter. They have AC, they have generators, etc., etc. But that is the major problem right now. It's clean up on the first day. It's assessing what's down, what's really bad, how fast can they fix it. And of course, for the inhabitants of St. Petersburg or Pinellas County here, Clearwater, and further down, Siesta Key, where the storm actually hit, it's a little bit more of rescue and helping people to get back into their homes and get the water out of those homes.
Mm-hmm. This hurricane, though, is much more than just a storm. With the U.S. presidential elections just around the corner, there is also a political dimension to this, isn't there?
There is, and there's many who say, unfortunately, and others who say, well, what did you expect? And what do I mean by this? You have former President Donald Trump saying, for example, that the federal government is siphoning off money which was supposed to go to FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And of course, this is absolutely unfounded. There's no truth to that. You have Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene from Georgia saying that actually the government is controlling the weather and that the bad weather others only coming to red counties, meaning with a majority of Republicans. So this has reached a state of ridiculousness and polarization and complete nonsense and falsehood, which is, I have to tell you, mind-boggling. Now, we tried to ask some people about this, but people here are really having other concerns. They don't want to be bothered with any of that. They wave us off and say, look, we need to make sure that the fallen trees and the power lines are getting repaired because we want to get back on our lives. They don't care for politics in that regard right now, right here.
It's not only mind-boggling, it's also very dangerous. That was DW's Stefan Simons in Clearwater, Florida. Thank you so much.
And we can talk now to Antoine Richards, who's in Tampa on Florida's west coast, where the hurricane made landfall last night. He's an expert on emergency management and an instructor at the University of Nevada. Antoine, so good to have you with us. Can you tell us about how you experienced the hurricane in Tampa?
You know, the Hurricane Milton is a very unique hurricane. It actually comes on the heels of Hurricane Helene. Hurricane Helene had a lot of immense damage to this area, and that was a little more than a week ago. So a lot of the communities are still recovering. And then the anticipation during recovery of another catastrophic hurricane with devastating impacts was something that built up a lot of anxiety. So there were a lot of communities still reeling from that. Milton came in with very strong winds as a Category 3, over 100 mile per hour winds in our area. And you know, for me and my family to hear that outside, the howling, the whistling, the trees falling down, and to wake up this morning with the fences down and to see flooding and things of that nature, you know, it was a harrowing experience. And at the same time, you know, my heart goes out for a lot of the individuals who are still recovering and lost everything in Hurricane Helene and are now dealing with the impacts of Milton as well.
You've made it really clear just how much anxiety and stress and experience like this brings. And then we have the fact that more than 3 million households are without power across Florida, many even without water. What needs to happen to get people through this?
You know, there's an emphasis on equity is important here. Our organization, the Institute for Diversity and Inclusion in Emergency Management, always focuses on equity. And a lot of times in disasters, what you'll see are the immense power outages and things of that nature. But you'll find that the way that things are prioritized are a lot different for underserved and marginalized populations. There are a lot of people in need. So from an emergency management perspective, it's important for us on the community to be safe, but then also for those pieces that are in place and ready to respond and recover, help these communities recover, are in place as well. So there are a lot of things, there are a lot of resources on the ground that are moving out. And at the same time, we have to make sure that we're prioritizing those that need it the most in the times of the most. And that's going to take a coordinated effort. It's going to take intentionality, and definitely it takes knowing who those individuals, those families, and those communities are, and then coming up with a set plan of action to ensure that we are prioritizing the needs of everyone.
And what about the rescue efforts? Can you tell us how they're going right now?
You know, the hardest hit area where it made direct impact was Siesta Key and Sarasota. So those areas obviously have rescue operations that are in place. They're moving forward. You know, this storm was interesting again because Helene caused so much damage right before. So there were mandatory evacuation orders up and down the coast. Particularly, we do it by zone. So Zone A, Zone B, and Zone C all had mandatory evacuations. And understanding the impacts of Helene, where not as many people evacuated, there were a lot more evacuations this time. And so, you know, search and rescue efforts are underway, but you find that they're a little bit better with this storm because we were just dealing with the impacts of Helene not too long ago.
Yeah. How well were the authorities prepared for this? I mean, had they learned from previous experiences?
You know, I think there's always learning that can happen in place when it comes to these things. I think we were, again, a bit more prepared just because of the impacts of Helene not too long ago. I think Helene, if I recall, was only about 7 to 8 days ago. So, you know, making sure that we have things in place. This is nothing new to us in Florida. However, you know, making sure that people are evacuating, making sure that the resources are there, making sure that everything that is on the ground from Helene, all of the organizations, the voluntary organizations, which had already mobilized and are in place, are set and ready to begin recovery operations immediately after the storm. So Milton hit last night, and I anticipate seeing a lot of those resources that were on the ground before actually able to hop right back into place logistically because they were already here. So I think it was a little more preparedness in terms of this disaster, just because we experienced something just as devastating not even a week ago.
Antoine Richards, Chief of Staff at the Institute for Diversity and Inclusion in Emergency Management. Antoine, thank you so much for coming on the programme and telling us about your experiences.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Now, Hurricane Milton has also become a US election issue. President Joe Biden has criticised the Republican candidate, Donald Trump, for leading what he called an onslaught of lies over the government's response to the storm and the previous Hurricane Helene.
Over the last few weeks, there's been a reckless and irresponsible and relentless promotion of disinformation and outright lies about what's going on. Literally, there are thousands of fellow Americans who are putting their lives at stake and putting on the line to do the dangerous work that needs to be done now. And it's harmful to those who most need the help. Quite frankly, these lies are un-American.
And joining me here in the studio is DW's Washington Bureau Chief Innes Paul for more on this. Thanks so much for joining us, Innes. So we heard some pretty strong words there from Joe Biden about Donald Trump, didn't we?
Yeah, and rightly so, because, Anya, you know, this is not a joke. Some policymakers, Marjorie Taylor Greene, for example, she said that the government can control hurricanes and that it's the government's fault that these two last hurricanes hit mainly Republican areas, or areas where many Republicans are living. And that is really dangerous because this, again, is undermining the trust in a democratic process. So this is really it's a dangerous moment in the United States again.
Extraordinary claims there. I mean, Biden was, of course, supposed to be travelling to Germany this week, wasn't he? He postponed his trip because of Hurricane Milton. Did he have any choice in that? And could his response to the storm, do you think, somehow affect the election in November?
That's actually why I'm here, Anya. I was supposed to travel or to follow Joe Biden's trip. I was already in the plane when he announced that he's not coming. I mean, he wanted to come here to really fight the war in Ukraine, and now he's fighting a war against misinformation back home in the United States. He didn't have any choice. I know that he faces a lot of criticism, especially here from Europe, from European countries, that he's not attending the meetings with Ukrainian and European leaders, but he had to be home and really talk about this misinformation and try to get the information straight, because this election will be so razor thin, the outcome. So he has to fight for every single vote, and that's what he's doing now.
As you say, it really matters, doesn't it? And I mean, if we talk about misinformation, you know, suggestions that the government is controlling the weather, you know, the question is, it has to be asked, do people believe this? And I mean, do you think that it's actually going to affect voter sentiment?
They do believe that and other things. I mean, we are traveling a lot. We're going to rallies. We're talking to regular American voters. And the problem really is that more and more people, as it happens here in Germany as well, of course, are just believing their own little social media bubbles. And therefore, it's so important that we also, that DW colleagues are out there and report what really happens, that they report on what FEMA, the Federal Emergency Agency, really delivers, what they how they help people on the ground, and what the Kamala Harris and Joe Biden administration is doing, and what, for example, the Floridian Governor Ron DeSantis says. He was praising Joe Biden, saying that he gets all the help he needs. So this comes down to really, where do people get their information from and whom do they trust? And that is really becoming a major issue in the United States, as it is in so many other countries.
Innes, thank you so much. That's DW's Washington Bureau Chief, Innes Paul.